All right, let's do a quick word association. When I say the word Persia, what pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's probably this kind of vague image of a massive, decadent empire, straight out of the movies. Well, today, we're going to tear that old story down.
You see, for most of history, the story we got about ancient Persia came from one place and one place only, their biggest rivals, the ancient Greeks. And let me tell you, in their histories and their plays, they painted a picture. They made the Persians out to be the ultimate villains, these weak, dishonorable barbarians. This image right here, the brave Greek warrior standing over a cowering Persian, that became the story for centuries.
But what if that whole story is wrong? What happens if we just push the Greek version to the side for a minute? What if we could actually hear from the Persians themselves? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to uncover the story of Persia, but this time in their own words.
To do that, we've got to look at the actual evidence the Persians left for us. We need to find what one historian, Lloyd Llewellyn-Jones, calls the Persian version of their own history.
And right away, you see this huge difference in how they even thought about history. The Greeks, guys like Herodotus, they wrote stories, narratives with heroes and villains and a very clear political message, which was, hey, Greeks are better. The Persians, they didn't really write history books. They carved their story onto monuments. They put it in royal decrees. For them, it was all about cosmic order, about justice, and the king's divine right to rule.
And this is that Persian voice. This line is from the tomb of the great King Darius. And you'll notice it's not a story about one specific battle. It's a bold, confident statement of who they are. This is how the Persians saw themselves, as a powerful people whose reach was long and whose strength was just a fact of life.
And honestly, they had every reason to be that confident. Back in the 6th century BCE, the Achaemenid dynasty just exploded out of this small territory in what's now Iran, and they created something the world had literally never seen before.
I mean, just look at the sheer scale of this thing. At its peak, the Persian Empire stretched from the Danube River in Europe, all across the Middle East and Egypt, all the way to the Indus River in India. It was history's first true global superpower. It connected East and West in a way that was completely new.
And their rise was just meteoric. We're talking about just 3 decades. In 30 years, under a handful of really smart kings, Persia went from a local power to a world empire. Cyrus the Great laid the groundwork, his son Cambyses added the ancient, super-wealthy kingdom of Egypt, and then Darius I came in and basically organized the whole thing so it would last.
So how do you rule an empire that is this huge and this diverse? The answer, weirdly enough, comes down to a single old Persian word that King Darius loved to use, Vispizananam. It means of all kinds. And that one word tells you everything about their core philosophy. He didn't see all this diversity as a weakness or a problem. He saw it as the source of his empire's strength.
This idea that there's strength in diversity, it created a way of ruling an empire that was totally different from what came before and, frankly, a lot of what came after.
This chart just lays it out so clearly. Think about later empires like Rome or Great Britain. Their whole goal was to impose their own culture, their language, their laws on everyone else, to Romanize them. The Persians had a totally different playbook. They were much more hands-off. They let local rulers stay in power, let people speak their own languages, worship their own gods. The idea wasn't become like us. It was more like, let's work together.
And here is that exact idea carved right into stone. This relief is from Darius's tomb. You see the king up on his throne, and that throne is literally being held up by people who represent all the different nations in his empire. The message could not be more clear. The king's power rests on the shoulders of his multicultural people.
Now, we shouldn't get too romantic about it. This was still an empire, and it was built through war. But as the historian here points out, the simple fact that the Persians could even imagine a peaceful, harmonious, multicultural empire, that was revolutionary. That's a level of thinking that a lot of later, more famous empires never quite reached.
Okay, so if this empire was so successful, so stable, why did it end? The answer really bucks that typical rise and fall story we always hear, and it leads us to its really long and fascinating afterlife.
So, the Persian Empire didn't just crumble from the inside. It wasn't decadent or decaying. It was still rich, it was still working, it was still powerful. Its end, when it came in the 330s BCE, was fast and violent. It was a military conquest, led by one of the most ambitious generals in all of history,
Alexander of Macedon. But here's the thing. Even though the empire was gone, the idea of the Persian Empire didn't die. For the next 1,000 years, its memory was this incredibly powerful force in Iran. Later dynasties, like the Sasanian, they would link themselves directly to those ancient kings to make themselves seem more legitimate. And then, centuries after that, epic poems like the Shahnameh turned these historical kings into national heroes, basically weaving them into the cultural DNA of Iran forever.
This incredible place, Nash-e-Rustam, became a kind of anchor for that memory. Those giant carvings are the tombs of the great Achaemenid kings. And then hundreds of years later, Sasanian kings came to the exact same spot and carved their own massive reliefs right next to them. It's like they were physically connecting their own reign to the glory of the past, writing their story right onto the landscape.
And that brings us full circle. The story of Persia proves that the version of history we all know isn't always the whole story. You know that old saying, history is written by the victors? Well, this is what happens when the vanquished get to speak again. And it leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What other stories have we missed?